Hello, everybody. My name's Chuck Schiele, and we're here again at Making Music Mag with another artist feature with Mr. Jeff Coffin. You might know him from certain jazz circles. You might know him from the Dave Matthews Band. And he's here to talk music with us today. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, man. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Awesome.
All right, so looks like you're having a blast in your career. You have your own groups, you have jazz affiliations, you have teaching and educational stuff. You play with Dave and all that. To what do you attribute all this success? Things are going very well for you.
Um, I'm lucky, very lucky. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, relationships over the years and being in the right place at the right time. But also, I'm a really hard worker. I'm a total workaholic, man. And but because it's something I really love to do, it feels like, believe me, it feels like work sometimes. But there are many times where it doesn't. The things that I'm really passionate about, I'm really passionate about those things. And so I think that carries through, and I try to be, really easy to work with and easy to get along with. I think there's a lot of different factors. I'm also interested in a lot of styles of music. I don't consider myself to be a jazz musician. I don't consider myself to be a pop or a rock musician. I'm just a musician. And so being a musician, it's you play music.
Yeah, right.
So to me, like I just did a session with a Hungarian band last week. They sent me some stuff. I just recently got a pterodactyl, which is a traditional Hungarian instrument that's like a cross between a soprano and a clarinet. Same tonality as the soprano, basically the same fingerings. And so they said, we know you just got a pterodactyl. We want pterodactyl on this one tune. And I was like, yes. So, it's
Wow.
not like I know the tradition, but I know the sound. And so there can be that. And then, I've got a little jazz trio gig this Wednesday, my first gig in 7 months. This kind of an outdoor thing at this little French restaurant here in town, and with Victor Krause, the great bass player, and
Whoa.
a brilliant drummer named Jordan Perlson who lives here. And so we're just going to play original music, keep it soft, keep it quiet, but we get to play music. It's literally a block from my house. I mean, I could walk there with my horns if I was just bringing one, but I'm going to bring a bunch. And so it's kind of all over the place, and doing different recordings and writing my own material. And so I think my successes come from doing things well, from being over prepared for things, for not just giving somebody a product. Like when I record up here, this is my loft studio. When I record up here and do overdubs for people on their recordings, which I do a fair amount of, it's not like I just throw something against the wall and be like, okay, here you go, this is what you get. It's like I work with the artist, and I'll go back in if they want something else. But I always try to give them more than what they thought I was going to give them. And so I think that's kind of always been my rule of thumb. It's like, give them more than they expect. Know what your role is within the ensemble and within the group. And, try not to stick out. Don't be the thumb, be the fist. Don't stick out,
Wow.
you know.
That's a good one. How did you get interested in the saxophone in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting question, man, because I think it chose me more than I chose it. Um, I wanted to play drums, and in elementary school, basically 5th grade, middle school, I guess. I think is when we started. But I said that I want to play drums, and I would imagine my folks were behind me going like, "It's not going to happen." I lived on a farm up in Maine, so there wasn't, it wasn't like we had a lot of room in the house for drums. And so my director said, well, what about the saxophone? We need some saxophone players. And I was like, okay, sure. I didn't know anything about the saxophone. I had heard it on the radio, of course, but I remember getting it home, and it was a Vito, one of those. It was a new horn, so it was a loaner, rental horn.
Hmm.
and it had that blue kind of faux alligator on the outside. You open it up, and it had these silver latches. I remember opening it up, and it was like a velvet Elvis on the inside, you know, like that real plush kind of blue velvet. And there was the horn, shiny gold, with the neck and the mouthpiece and the ligature and the cap, and the swab and the cleaning cloth, and it had a lyre and some reeds, and I was like, wow, man, that's a lot of stuff. And I closed the horn. I was like, that's too much stuff for me to deal with. And so I was like, I'll look at it later, you know. But I took to it quickly.
But you were interested in drums.
Yeah. I didn't know anything about the saxophone.
But the sax had too much stuff, but the drums did not. I see.
Apparently. I mean, I think I was just interested in rhythm, you know. I think that's what it was. I think that I was already feeling music, you know. And to me, the drums, that's where you feel music. And so, you know, I kind of took to it quickly, and I was able to start to find melodies on the saxophone because I've always been very interested. I've always been very influenced and interested in vocals, and but I have a terrible voice, so the saxophone became my voice. So I would emulate, you know, everything from Led Zeppelin to, we had Dave Brubeck records, so I was listening to Paul Desmond, but I was listening to pop music, Styx and Led Zeppelin and, you know, Boston and, you know, whatever else we had laying around the house.
Sure.
You know, my dad was a Neil Diamond fan. We had Cat Stevens. So we had some pop music on vinyl. And I also had 8 tracks of like Tom Scott and Boots Randolph, you know, and Queen. So I was listening to a hodgepodge of material and being influenced by all of that. I didn't hear Charlie Parker until I was in high school. You know, I thought like jazz was fusion. I didn't really know. Like Paul Desmond to me sounded like old music, and it was, but it was only like 15 years previous. You know, this would have been like mid 70s.
Sure.
You know. And,
yeah, I know what you mean. In the context of growing up in the 70s, it's our parents' music that.
Right.
Paul Desmond stuff, but then when you become a musician and you understand what they're saying,
yeah,
you find out those guys are actually a little bit into our future with what they're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you touched on, you know, growing up in music school, or, you know, the asking about drums and being directed to the horn. Mm-hmm. Tell us about your musical education and how you were formed up to this point.
Sure. Well, while I was in junior high, I lived in a small town in Maine called Dexter, and my director had a trio that he would do gigs with, and so he would usually have a drummer from high school, like one of the good drummers, obviously, and he would have a horn player, and he was kicking bass with his left hand. He was a keyboard player, played chords with his right, and sang. Mm-hmm. And so this band would do weddings and dances, you know, like Grange halls, and, you know, it was like it was a gigging band in Maine. And so starting the summer after my 7th grade year, I started playing with his trio. And so I was doing gigs for a little over a year, and then we moved to New Hampshire. So that all went away. And, you know, I knew that I had already caught the bug, so I knew that this was what I wanted to do. But in the high school that I went to in New Hampshire, it was a bigger school. You know, I was just coming in as a freshman, and I mean, I could play, but I couldn't really read music, so I would just kind of play everything by ear. And so I went to music camp and kind of got, you know, more involved with the scene that was there, and went for a couple of years part-time at the University of New Hampshire, just kind of learning how to practice. Then I went to North Texas and got my degree there, and got my music ed degree, actually, because it didn't really make sense for me to have a piece of paper that said I could play my horn, which would be what a jazz studies degree would have done. And so it made more sense, because I knew I enjoyed teaching, to have that part of the education also. And it's been great because, you know, I've done a lot of teaching through the years. I've done well over 300 clinics around the world, and I've been teaching at Vanderbilt University now this is my 6th year teaching there. And so I've been really fortunate, man, that my education. I was also taught to ask a lot of questions as a child, and so, I'm sure I've ruffled some feathers over the years asking why to my educators. But I encourage that with my students. I say that may be the most important word that you ever ask. And so if I'm telling a student to do long tones and they say why, I'm not offended by it. I'm excited by it because I can tell them why they need to do long tones. I can tell them why they need to work their scales and thirds. I can tell them why they need to work on their arpeggios and their inversions, et cetera, et cetera. So these are parts of my education that have influenced my career also. And so I look at it very holistically in that sense.
I should ask, are there things in your personal life
Yeah.
that factor into what you do as a working stage musician?
Yeah, I would say everything, quite honestly. All my life it's been music, but not all my friends are musicians, of course. Not all of my interests are musical. But all those things influence it. Like I was saying, it's very holistic to me. And so there's really no division between my creativity as a musician and my creativity as a photographer. I do a lot of photography also. So that carries over there. Or if, we're decorating the house, or if we're putting in a garden, or if, whatever it is that we're doing, I'm informed by everything in my life. And so my creativity is it's 24/7, and so the things that I see, the places that I go, the people that I meet, the experiences that I have, I feel like those are all part of what I do as a musician also. And the things I do as a musician carry over into the things that I do in other places. So it's very reciprocal. I personally don't perceive any division,
Cool.
Yeah. I think that's what I would say.
That's the way it should be, I think.
Yeah.
So what's on your mind when you take the stage? Everybody's roaring, ready to go.
Well, it's interesting, man, because for me, I think of music as as a service industry, and so there's a number of things that go through my mind when I'm getting ready to hit the stage. First of all, it's super exciting, and I just making music with people is one of the greatest joys in my life. One of my favorite parts on stage is when I'm not playing. And I'm sure it's some other people's favorite part too, but it's my favorite part because I get to listen to everybody else.
Sure.
And whether it's a solo or just a groove that's going on, whatever it may be, I just love listening to music, and I love being there and being immersed in it. Because we don't just listen with our ears; we listen with our whole body. The skin is the largest organ on our body, so we're taking in a lot of information from our skin also, from our entire body. So the vibrations that we're feeling on stage, you vibe out on this stuff. And the energy of the audience, of course, the energy of the band, the music. I'm fortunate that I play music that I really love to play. And but I also look at it in the way that, again, coming back to this idea of the service industry, that I'm serving the music first and foremost. And everybody with Dave Matthews and the other groups I play with, everybody is of the same thought, And so I serve the music first, and then I have to serve the musicians I'm playing with, and then I have to serve the audience. So I'm at least fourth on the list, But by serving those others, I in turn get served. So it's this very reciprocal kind of thing, and I've told people many times that my goal at the end of the night is to feel like I've been in the audience and that the audience has been on stage. That's the kind of relationship that I want the groups that I play with to have with the audience, and it's got that kind of intimacy to it, and that's what I really love. Playing with Matthews is like playing with a 7-piece small group in front of 15 or 20,000 people a night. It's got that kind of intimacy to it, that kind of fellowship and brotherhood, and so it's beautiful, man. You know, I'm so grateful and so fortunate.
So what are the things that make you particularly interested in working with any particular musician or project for that?
Well, I think it varies. First of all, the music has to be interesting to me. And the music, and this is not to be a snob, but the music has to be at a certain level.
Sure.
You know, artistically and creatively. I remember years ago, he's become a very good friend of mine. I won't say his name just to, you know, kind of protect the situation, but he had sent me, he said, "Hey, I'm doing this record. I'd love for you to play on it." And he was up and coming at the time. He's pretty well known now, actually. And he played kind of an unusual instrument. And so he sent me the recording, and I said, you know, man, I got to be honest with you. I said, I'm not going to play on it. I said, but I have to tell you why. And I said, you know, you're the best musician on this record. You know, and I said, the cats that you're playing with are not up to your level. And I said, you get basically one chance in this industry, maybe two. And I said, it has to be better than this. If you want people like me to play on your record, it has to be better, you know. And he took it to heart, man. He said, you know, he said it was brutal for me to hear that. He said it was heartbreaking for me to hear that. He said, but he said we had known each other. He says, and I knew where it was coming from. And he said, if I was able to get myself out of it personally, he says because I knew that was my ego. He said, if I was able to just listen to what you said and look at the situation, he said, I realized you were right. You know? And he's playing with like just unbelievable musicians now. And he's grown in such incredible ways, man. And so, you know, sometimes it's tough. You have to be honest with people, not to slam them, but just to say, hey, man, like this needs to be better. And
well, I would take it as a respectful gesture. Actually, you know, it's your art. You said you're serving the music, and so with great respect, we must serve that music to the best of our ability. So I think that's what you mean by that. Like you can be better in respecting your own stuff.
Right. So. Right. And so what I look for is can I add something to this? You know, can I elevate this? I do a lot of woodwinds stuff here. I have everything from bass flute to, you know, all the saxophones, all the flutes, bass to piccolo, bass clarinet and clarinet. I've got whistles. I've got the pterodactyl now, you know, kind of everything in between. And so whatever style of music, I'm pretty well versed in many styles of music. So I feel like I can be fairly authentic in what somebody presents to me, whether it's a rock tune or a pop thing or a jazz tune or whatever it may be, ethnically based, whatever. And so those are things that you know that I consider. What's my role in the ensemble? And understanding your role is a big part of being successful. You know, if somebody asks me to put horns on a record, they're not saying solo. You know, they're saying we want horns on this. So I have to think, okay, how do I fit into this? Like, what is the sound of this record? And what are the instrumentations? Where is it sonically fitting in from a vertical perspective, from a strata of sound? What's kind of the punctuation? What's the accent? What's the articulation that I'm going to use on this? You know, what's going to be the lead voice that stays, if there's a vocal that stays out of the vocal range? You know, what parts am I listening to to kind of reinforce what the rhythm section is doing, for example. There's all sorts of things that I think about, when I'm accepting something. And there are people that I know that I've worked with in the past who are like, hey, I've got a tune for you. I'm like, send it. Because I know there's such badasses that, like, regardless of what it is, it's going to be something really interesting, and it's going to be fun to play on.
In regard to a little earlier, you had mentioned, you had alluded to the art of listening, the science of listening.
Yeah.
For the benefit of our viewers, most who come in from an educational interest, can you discuss about the art of listening a little bit? Like,
of course,
I'm always aware when I'm playing with other people. Are you listening to the band, or are you not listening to the band?
Yeah.
Days, like you said, at a certain level, I only play with the people who listen at this point. But why is that so important?
Yeah. Well, I say that it's the act of listening, like the act of listening, and it's also active listening. Mm-hmm. They sound really similar, So when you're active in the process of listening, it's a different thing. You're also in the act of listening. So there's a difference between passive and active listening. And passive listening, I think, is, let's say you're making dinner, with your family, and you've got something playing in the background. That's passive listening. And you hear it in
hearing. You're just hearing.
Yeah, it's like it's in the grocery store or something as you're walking through. Maybe you notice it, maybe you don't. Active listening, or the act of listening, you have to be actively engaged. It's not like you can be checking Facebook and checking out Coltrane at the same time. You have to be in process of listening. And so I think that listening is the most important fundamental that there is. And I love that. I'm gonna show you something here real quick. Get a blank sheet of paper. So if I write out the word listen, right? If I use those same letters and I rearrange them. Silent. Yep. So there's a great clue in the word itself on how to be a better listener. And that is that sometimes you need to zip it and just listen. And I think there's I think we're seeing a real issue these days from a societal position also. People are not being heard. People do not know how to listen.
Oh man, just get on that subject, just politically, like nobody's listening.
Right, exactly. Not on either side. We saw with the debate the other night. It was atrocious.
Making me crazy.
And so again, the art of listening, it's a challenging thing, and everybody feels like they want to be heard, and yet nobody's listening. And so when you're not heard, it's frustrating. It's like this happens in relationships all the time, man. Someone's not being heard, and it happens in bands, it happens in marriages, in friendships, all over the place, and so I think that we all need to become better listeners, and that's one of the things that I continue to work on. And I love the old saying. It says you teach best what you most need to learn. And so it's not lost on me that for the last almost 30 years I've been teaching listening. So that tells me something.
Right,
so I'm working, I'm trying, You
get the hang of it, yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you tell a kid just entering the world of music? They want to do this. They hit that moment that you hit when you saw the light and you realize,
sure.
Yeah, I'm doing this. This is what I want to do. When you meet those people, what would you tell that person? Could be big kid, little kid, any kid.
Well, I support it, first of all. I advocate for them, and I support them. It's important that they understand how much work they're in for, and that there's no guarantees either. That's one of the challenging things about being a musician, is that we spend probably as much time as a doctor working on our craft, and yet there's no guarantee that there's even going to be a gig at the end, or a place for us as musicians. So that's a challenging proposition. Um, Look, just being able to play your instrument is not enough. Just because like you're the baddest cat in your class, well, there's a bunch of baddest cats in their class that are at North Texas, Berkeley, UCLA, New School, Manhattan School of Music, Northwestern, blah blah, like all over the world, you know. Um, and there's kind of a finite amount of gigs. So let's say you move to Nashville, you know, and you may be a killing player, but you're still on the lower end of the totem pole, you know. And if you start getting a bunch of work that other people have had in the past, then they're going to be upset, and you know there's going to be some friction. So I think going in and recognizing that there is a process to all of this is important. That it's not just going to happen for you like that, or it's not overnight. It's a long, arduous process filled with developing relationships with people. And those relationships are going to be the things that carry you into the next phase of your career. If you just want to have gigs, that's one thing. But if you want to have a career, it's an entirely different thing. And these relationships that you develop are the cornerstones of your career. So getting the first gig is easy. Getting called back is a whole different set of skills. And so those can be things like, were you on time? You know, like I just booted somebody from the small group at Vanderbilt. Why? Because he was always late and totally unprepared. I was like, I'm sorry, man. Like, this is not okay. You know, and so you got to go. Because I'm not gonna let the music suffer, and I'm not going to allow the students to suffer because you can't get it together. You know, I said, but let this be a teachable moment, because whatever you choose to do in your life, whether it's music or something else, if you do this, you're not going to be successful. You know, so let's say that you get to a gig and you show up. The gig's at 6 o'clock. You show up at 5:55, and you're scrambling. You're trying to get your stuff together. Everybody's already sitting down. If it's a sit-down gig, you know, they're waiting for you, man. And the leader, I can tell you, as a leader, that would drive me insane. You know, if the gig's at 6 o'clock, man, you show up at 5:30. We hang for a minute. You get it together. We talk about the gig. You know, you relax. You're there. There's no tension. Good to go. You know, but if you show up on time, you're late. And don't just do the gig and split. Like, if there's something you can help with, man, offer to help. Just because somebody's got to do it. You know, offer to help the drummer with their gig. Man, there's not a drummer in the world that's going to say, thanks, I got it. You know? So it's just, it's about being a good human being, man. It's about helping people out and saying, hey, man, like, can I help? And most people are going to say, oh, man, thank you. And then they're going to be like, hey, I got this gig next weekend, man. Can you do it? Yeah, I'd love to. You know, and so you develop relationships, not because you're trying to kiss somebody's butt, but because you're a good human being. You know, and I had great parents. You know, my mom is still around. She's amazing, and in my like when I'm the leader on a group, man, my concern is to make sure everybody is taken care of to a fault. Quite honestly, you know, and because trying to make sure everybody is happy, invariably somebody's not going to be, you know, but that's always my goal. I'm always trying to serve them before me, and I get that from my mom. It comes by me honestly, man. You know, it's not something that's insincere, and but it's tough. You know, I mean, I wrote a book about being on the road called The Road Book. And a musician's guide to navigating the road before you even leave the driveway. You know, so these are some helpful tips about like being out there and how to make this stuff work, especially if you're going to be a leader. Of course, there's no gigs now, but
Yeah. Well, we'll get back to it shortly, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.
Keeping the faith. I mean, music has endured plagues, wars, time itself, and
Oh
so on.
yeah.
It just manages to keep going. So
Yep.
we'll be around. So
Absolutely.
anyway, well, okay. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming in and talking with us today. Um, hey, by any chance you got that Hungarian instrument hanging
Yeah,
around?
I sure do.
Let's hear that thing. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, I'll show it to you here. So it's called the Taragato, Tarogato. I was telling Bela Fleck about it the other day. He says, pterodactyl? I was
Yeah.
like, oh, so good, man. So yeah, it's now officially a pterodactyl. And
All right.
so the other day, his son, who, gosh, I think he's 3, maybe. Apparently, his youngest son is playing a lot of music,
Hmm.
and he said, "Man, he said he's really been into Old MacDonald Had a Farm." So Bela's wife Abby said, she said, "Hey, get him to play Old MacDonald, like with some variations." So I played it on the Taragato and sent him a video of it, like modulating each time, and but it was really funny. But anyway, so it's got a sound that's kind of a cross between a soprano sax and a clarinet, almost like a little bit of an English horn kind of sound to it. It's very mellow.
Hmm.
It's made of wood. It's it's longer than a soprano. It's longer than a soprano, but it has holes in the bell. I'm not sure if you can see. Right.
Yep. Oh yeah.
But so the sound stops here. So it is the same size as a soprano, but I don't know what the holes are for in the bell. I've got to ask somebody at some point.
Probably to drain the water.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But there's a Hungarian maker that made this. I actually bought this from Charles Lloyd, the
Huh.
great saxophonist Charles Lloyd, and I'm thrilled to have it. I'm so excited, and it's such a beautiful instrument. But yeah, I'll play a little something on it.
There you go, folks. Making music first. You heard Jeff Coffin play personally for you a pterodactyl solo.
A pterodactyl.
A pterodactyl solo, including what? 3 holes in the horn?
3 holes in the horn.
Man, that's amazing. Another making music first. Thank you very much for that and sharing that.
Absolutely, Chuck. My
I've never
pleasure.
seen one of those before. That sounds cool.
Yeah, there's. I don't think there's many people in the states that play them, but it's such a.
It's kind of a hybrid sound,
It is. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah, I've recorded this. I just recorded it with this Hungarian band this last week called Rakajam, Rakajam, and so their next record will have me playing the Taragato on it.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, thanks again. Thanks a lot for
my pleasure.
sharing your time with us. That was a lot of fun, and it's once again very nice meeting you. So I certainly wish you much more success. I hope
Thank
you
you,
get
sir.
back busy playing again and on the road, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Sounds great, brother. Thanks,
Thanks,
Chuck.
Jeff.
Peace,
Take
everybody.
care. Peace. Okay, folks, there goes another great interview with another great musician. That was Jeff Coffin from the Dave Matthews Band, Bela Fleck, and a variety of other jazz and otherwise groups. Thanks again, Jeff. If you had a good time, make sure you hit the like button there, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow all of our social media channels. We're everywhere all the time. everywhere, all the time. So we appreciate that you come and hang out with us. We love you and love hanging out with you. So we hope to see you soon. Have a great day, everybody. See you soon.